Father Cristino, welcome back to the third Friday of Advent. Good to have you back.
Glad to be with you.
Actually, we did all these in a row, so we have to be honest about this, but I appreciate your time. Today, St. Alphonsus is talking about the religious vocation, and so I'm going to ask you some thoughts about the religious life and some based upon his quotes, but then to see how they can also translate over to the sacrament of marriage. Mm-hmm. St. Alphonsus says, finally, let him who wishes to enter religion, he means religious life, resolve to become a saint and to suffer every exterior and interior pain in order to be faithful to God and not to lose his vocation. Okay, so firstly, can you distinguish between what you think is an interior pain and an exterior pain?
Mm-hmm. So this is something that in our tradition we would classically differentiate between what we call corporal mortification and spiritual mortification. So corporal meaning corpus, the body, right? So something that we do to let ourselves be physically afflicted with some pain or discomfort. I think people's minds automatically go to the classic image of someone whipping themselves or whatever the case may be, but there's many other ways than just doing something as extreme as that. You can have a pebble in your shoe and notice that it's there, and instead of stopping and taking it out right away to say, no, I'm going to finish walking wherever I'm going and offer up this discomfort, or you get into your vehicle when it's super hot or super cold and you say, oh, I'll give it a little bit before I open the window or before I turn on the heater, whatever. There's ways in which we can allow ourselves to experience some kind of discomfort that we notice physically. Maybe the most commonly accessed version of this is fasting, mm-hmm. Letting those hunger pains in our stomach remind us that we should always be hungering for God. So that's an external, a corporal mortification. And then spiritually, there are things that we can do interiorly, things that you don't feel them, but they cause something in your soul. You notice that they're creating a phenomenon within you that you can't really describe in physical terms. And those have much more to do with the way in which we enter into our interior and spiritual life, the way that we bear a humiliation, the way that we're in a room where maybe we know the answer to something, but instead of saying it, we just keep quiet because we don't need to draw attention to ourselves. Ways in which we have an internal disposition that no one possibly could know. Those become ways that we can offer those to our Lord. Right, that they don't have to be something that anyone else can participate in because we're just giving that only to Him. Only He knows that that's happening within us. So those are the difference between the two. And St. Alphonsus is saying that anyone who is going to live fruitfully their vocation, in this case he's commenting on those who are in religious life or consecrated life, would need to have both of those realities of internal and external mortifications present in how they live fruitfully their vocation.
He also mentions that one needs to be resolved to become a saint in order to be a good religious. As a vocations director for your diocese, mm-hmm. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I hope that all of my seminarians want to be saints. And I'm so edified to really truly believe that they do. We have such remarkable seminarians in our diocese and across the board. I think most vocation directors nowadays would say that they know they have really fine men who are seeking to be formed for the priesthood in their respective dioceses. The priesthood asks a lot from us, and there's a lot of time that goes into it now, and it takes a long time to be ordained, and there's not the social acclaim that comes as it may have several generations ago with becoming a priest. You really sacrifice a lot, and people don't necessarily understand, and therefore they might treat it like, oh, that's a waste, or mm-hmm. I don't know why you would bother doing that. And so to be misunderstood and sometimes even kind of disrespected in pursuit of that, it takes a lot. It takes an inner resolve to say, I don't want this for any of these other reasons, other than I believe that this is what the Lord is asking for me. I want to serve Him. I want to serve His people. I want to glorify Him. And so that in itself is the beginning to the path of sanctity and sainthood. And so I believe that, and I'm so grateful to have young men who are pursuing the priesthood in our diocese and under my care who inspire me to want to be a better and a holier priest.
So St. Alphonsus mentions the resolve to want to be a saint, and the willingness to suffer interior and exterior pains. How does this translate also over to the sacrament of marriage?
Well, we always say that the sacrament of holy matrimony is a vocation in itself. It is not some other state of life that we just tolerate because that's how more people are generated through procreation. It is endowed with its own dignity. We say that marriage is actually the very first thing that God ever instituted. The institution of marriage even precedes the institution of the church. And so there is a beautiful endowment of dignity and sacredness contained within it, and therefore is also a path to holiness. And every couple knows implicitly, whether or not they would put it in these terms, what it means to be willing to suffer internally and externally, interiorly and exteriorly, out of love for your spouse. Not grabbing the blankets off of your spouse who's rolled over and pulled them all out into herself at night. You say, well, I'll make do, or I'll put on a sweater. That is a beautiful exterior mortification that you would say, if my wife is comfortable and she's resting, I don't want to disturb her.
I shouldn't pull those covers back?
No, Ken. I'm sure. And Janelle didn't ask me to bring this up, just to be clear. But that's a way in which you would have to be able to say, how can I do this? And then equally, there's many, many ways that interiorly a spouse has to be prepared to suffer, where they maybe feel disregarded or not listened to, or they know that their spouse is having a bad day. And so with grace and with patience, they seek not to get equal with them or to compare and say, you think you had a bad day? Well, what do you think happened here? But instead to say, how can I try through whatever little gestures to make my husband or wife feel better and to feel loved, despite whatever's happened to them today. Those are ways that require the very same willingness to endure pain, whether they be exterior or interior, that will produce the same effects of holiness in married life, and the same way that in religious life we ought to also strive to do the same.
Okay, I'd like to shift gears. I was going to read the quote, but I'll just summarize it. Later, St. Alphonsus talks about the person who is unwilling to suffer those interior and exterior pains and maybe doesn't have a great resolve to be a saint, really runs the risk of losing their religious vocation. And they discredit themselves, and it's hard. He describes how it's hard for them to get back on track with their relationship with God. I think there has been, and many our watchers are very aware of, the different scandals within the church, and maybe some personal failings that some priests have, and they can end up being quite public. And a lot of time, we focus on how that might hurt the laity. I want to set that aside. More of a personal question to you. Have you had a brother priest that you know leave the priesthood? And number two, if that is the case, how does that affect you as his brother priest in the priesthood?
Well, I certainly have. I know men who have left the priesthood, and I've known to varying degrees. Some with whom I would say I was especially close, and others who maybe I wasn't very close to them, but I knew them or worked with them. And in more recent times, we even hear of priests who undergo some kind of sanction, or they end up being suspended from their ministry, or whatever the case may be. It's not, sadly, it's not an uncommon experience to endure the pain of watching a brother no longer be right there with you, shoulder to shoulder in the battlefield. It is a source of pain, partly because I am then left wondering, have I failed my brother somehow? It's easy to say, he obviously was not doing enough interior and exterior mortification in order to preserve his vocation. That's probably true, and part of why that is true is because you can't really use the word enough. We don't talk about enough in our lexicon as Christians. We always strive to do more and better. We've reflected upon that also. But the enough in the case of one who has lost his vocation could equally be turned back to those who surround him, because we don't live our vocations by ourselves. We can't. I am so richly blessed by my brothers in the priesthood who care for me, who think of me, who reach out to me. It's happened numerous times where at the end of a really long week, when I had something really difficult in the middle of the week that has weighed on me and depressed me or frustrated me, that one of my brothers who knows what's going on, a few days later will reach out and say, "Hey, I've been thinking of you. How are you doing? How did that go? How do you need to talk?" And just feeling cared for and supported by my brothers helps me be able to live my vocation better. And so I'm less inclined to diagnose how one of my brothers who has left the priesthood failed on his own part to guard and defend his vocation. There's nothing I can do about that if that's the case, but it does prompt me to ask, how could I have supported him better or differently? And therefore, how must I, on an ongoing basis moving forward, make sure that I continue to support and surround my brothers with love and attention that I ought to show them, so that we can continue to help each other in our little portion of the Lord's vineyard.
Well, thanks for your thoughts today. Appreciate it.
For sure.